Well, thank you, Chairman Barrasso, and thank you for your continued leadership in offering reforms designed to improve the management of our national forests. Chief Tidwell, I want to start by highlighting some recent visits to Montana National Forest that I've made just in the last couple weeks with local Forest Service as well as county leaders. I received a firsthand perspective of how responsible harvesting can be used to be a vital tool to improve our watersheds. We looked up there at the Chessman Reservoir there behind Helena, Montana, to reduce the risk of wildfire and to respond to beetle kill. And I want to publicly thank and give thanks to Lolo and Helena Lewis and Clark Forest Supervisors, Tim Garcia and Bill Avey. They're doing a wonderful job back in Montana, and their staffs, they spent time leading us in viewing these most important projects. Thank you. These site visits, I'll tell you, they did something for me. They reinforced for me that restoring the health of forests through active management is absolutely vital to conserving our forests and their many benefits for future generations. And as we all know, the situation right now out west is dire. We've got a potentially devastating wildfire season on our hands at the moment. It's already underway. Millions of acres of Montana's national forests are in an unacceptably dangerous condition. And for these reasons, I'm determined, I'm very motivated to pass legislation that gives your agency additional tools and authorities to compete and complete more forest health restoration projects and do them faster. So I've got a few questions I'd like to go through. First of all, regarding categorical exclusions, which you talked about in your testimony, particularly for collaborative developed projects. And I'm one who believes in and stands behind these collaborative efforts back in the West and particularly in Montana. I know from your testimony that there are considerations that should be discussed regarding size and scope of CEs. You made that clear. But broadly speaking, when the Forest Service uses categorical exclusions, including that 3,000 acre CE that was provided for in the 2014 Farm Bill, could you describe how your agency takes into account both public input and analyzes environmental impacts to ensure that CEs are used to enhance rather than hurt the environment?
When we have the opportunity to use a CE, when we have those categories, we start by working with our local collaboratives so that there's a sense of what needs to be done, there's support for that, and we move forward. And a CE does not, it doesn't eliminate our requirements to be able to analyze the project and to ensure that we're not having unnecessary impact. It does reduce the amount of documentation, written documentation, but because CEs are at a scale that's much smaller than what we usually do in EA or in EIS, so that it does take less time to be able to do it. But the key part of it is to have that public support so that you can go ahead and use this process where we still have public comment, we still address all the environmental concerns, but there's less documentation. So if it's the right scale and it has the assurances that some of the public needs, similar to what we did with the Farm Bill about roads, et cetera, it's been a very useful tool.
Yeah, and I think just to clarify for everybody here around CEs, make sure I've got this straight. So I'm just going to go through three quick kind of make sure I'm doing this correctly and you can answer. A categorical exclusion cannot be used if there's a potential adverse impact on an endangered species or a watershed. Is that correct?
That's correct with our regulations.
Right, and likewise, a categorical exclusion must be consistent with the local forest plan, correct?
Correct.
And mass clear cuts would not be allowed under CEs, correct?
Correct. The size of clear cuts, regeneration, harvest, it's governed by the National Forest Management Act that limits it to 40 acres in most of the country, and we have a few situations on the West Coast where we can use up to an 80-acre clear cut.
So, and lastly, as I'm running out of time, Chief Tidwell, if Congress did three things, if they expanded the responsible use of categorical exclusions, if they ended fire borrowing, if it reduced the effectiveness of obstructionist litigation, which the House has done with their recently passed legislation, and we're working to do the same thing here in the Senate. Could you describe how these reforms would help increase the pace and the scale of the Forest Service projects that improve the health of forests?
I would have to go a little bit further to see a change in the amount of work we could get accomplished. If by adding additional CEs that maintain the public trust, that we can continue to be able to use that to get more work done. If we eliminate FARO borrowing and at the same time address the 10-year average situation to provide a consistent flow of funds for the agency, and if we can find a way to address the concerns that drive litigation, we can be able to increase the pace and scale of the work that needs to be done. We have that track record, we've been doing it, and it's driven by the collaborative efforts that you commented on.
All right, thanks, Chief Tidwell, appreciate it.